Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking something that literally feeds the global economy, the valuation of agricultural properties. And, just as importantly, we're looking at exactly how we audit those valuations. We'll be diving directly into the international guidelines, specifically PVS GN 200 and GN 300, to really understand how this massive global sector is quantified. So, let's jump right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the roots of real estate, categorize farms, flocks, and facilities, look at the math behind the harvest, review the valuer's work, and finally, dive into the checks, balances, and regulations. But before we get lost in the numbers, I want you to just think about this for a second. How exactly do you appraise a living, breathing asset? Seriously, how do we assign a hard, reliable dollar value to unpredictable biological things, like weather-dependent crops or living animals? It is a truly fascinating challenge.
Section 1. The roots of real estate and why farm valuation matters.
You know, in many regions around the world, agricultural land isn't just a small piece of the economy, it is the sole economic base. There's this great quote from PVS GN 200 that spells it out perfectly. Reliable valuations of agricultural lands are essential to ensure the availability of capital necessary to support the continuity of the economic base and to maintain the confidence of capital markets. Basically, getting this math right is literally what keeps the capital flowing so the world stays fed. Consider the stark contrast between, say, a city skyscraper and a sprawling farm. In a typical urban environment, the soil is really just there to bear structural improvements, right? Its economic use can sit completely unchanged for decades. But out in agriculture, the soil itself is the principal agent of production, and the economic benefits and income streams from it, they bounce all over the place year to year based on weather, crop cycles, and shifting commodity markets. So standard real estate rules just don't work here. You have to throw them out the window. Moving on to Section 2, farms, flocks, and facilities, categorizing the land. Okay, we have to start with a fundamental definition from IAS 41. A biological asset is simply defined as a living animal or plant. And this is the absolute core difference in agricultural valuation. You aren't just valuing concrete and steel anymore. You are literally valuing life. Just think about the sheer scale and variety of agricultural assets we have to categorize. You've got crop farms running on tight annual cycles, and then dairy farms that require massive structural improvements, things like milking parlors and silos. You also have to distinguish between irrigated land, which relies entirely on broadened water, and dry land. And then there are livestock ranches, perennial plantings like vineyards and orchards that span decades, and highly specialized properties. Think grain elevators or poultry farms. Each one of these demands a completely different valuation approach. There's also a pretty fascinating quirk in real estate law here. Timber is actually considered real property while it's growing. But the exact second it's severed and removed from the land, boom, it instantly becomes personal property. The definitions in this space are incredibly fluid. We also have to account for what's called an integrated unit. That's an agricultural entity with common ownership of all or even just part of the processes involving the production and marketing of its products and commodities. This adds a massive layer of complexity when the farm itself and, let's say, the corporate marketing arm are bundled together. All right, Section 3, the math behind the harvest, the valuation playbook. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding the international accounting standards. So IAS 16 covers property, plant, and equipment, which is usually measured at cost less depreciation. Then you have IAS 40 handling investment property at fair value. But the real star of the show for us is IAS 41 for agriculture. This requires living biological assets that are attached to the land to be measured at fair value less estimated point of sale costs. And this is done completely separately from the land itself. Now, following generally accepted valuation principles, or GAVP, the fundamental basis is always market value. Valuers have to apportion this value per those IAS requirements we just talked about, and they also have to rigorously analyze the highest and best use. Like, should this land stay a farm, or is encroaching suburban expansion making it way more valuable as a new housing development? Furthermore, the stabilized income has to be based on regional crop patterns and cycles. You can't just look at one absolute banner year and call it good. You have to stabilize the income over nature's shifting, unpredictable cycles. Finally, separate components are valued strictly by their contribution to the whole property, not just what they'd sell for entirely on their own. Section 4 now, reviewing the valuer's work. Enter the referee. The entire financial system really only works if there's impartial judgment testing the correctness of the valuer's work. GN 300 puts it perfectly. Because of the need to ensure the accuracy, appropriateness, and quality of valuation reports, valuation reviews have become an integral part of professional practice. So why exactly are these reviews mandated? While they anchor highly technical valuations back down to massive real-world impacts, reviews are absolutely required for financial reporting, due diligence, and they provide critical expert testimony in legal proceedings. They form the basis for vital business decisions and test regulatory standard compliance. And crucially, they are mandatory for mortgage lending, especially government-insured mortgages. Without the review, the capital simply stops flowing. There's actually a strict escalation path for how these reviews are executed. It starts with an administrative review, which is really just for basic due diligence and compliance checking. Step it up a notch to a desk review, and that verifies the math, data reasonableness, and methodology, all right from the office. A field review escalates things to physical exterior and interior inspections of the property, as well as the comparables. Finally, the technical review is where another expert valuer steps in to form a professional opinion on whether the original analyses and conclusions are truly supportable.
And our final section, Section 5, Checks, Balances, and Regulations, the Audit Trail.
Accountability is strictly maintained through a very deliberate step-by-step process. First, the reviewer identifies the client, intended users, and the scope. Second, they pinpoint the subject property and the original valuer. Third, they develop an opinion on the adequacy of the data and the methodology that was used. And fourth, and this is the really critical part, they must explicitly explain their reasons for agreement or disagreement.
This referee operates within incredibly strict boundaries here. Most importantly, a reviewer cannot use hindsight. There's no way around it. They cannot consider events affecting the market that occurred after the valuation date. They have to judge the work based solely on what was known at the exact time it was done. They must fully disclose reasons for both agreement and disagreement. If facts are missing, they must disclose those limitations right up front. And the whole thing culminates in a legally binding signed compliance statement.
So I want to leave you with this thought. Will you ever look at a simple patch of dirt or a flock of sheep the exact same way again? Behind every harvest we see is a complex, meticulously audited web of global financial standards that quite literally holds up the entire agricultural economy. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.